please turn your cell phones to silent or turn them off. If you, when the commissioner gets finished speaking, he will take questions, and members of the press club and members of the working media are the ones who are allowed to ask questions. And we have a microphone, so if you have a question, raise your hand. Bill will bring the microphone around so everybody can hear the question. So our speaker today is Dr. Mike Strain. He's Commissioner of the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry. Commissioner Strain was first elected to the position in 2007 and will begin his 5th term in January after being re-elected with no opposition. Commissioner Strain was born and raised on a cattle farm in Covington, and after graduating from high school, he attended LSU, where he earned a doctorate in veterinary medicine. A year later, he married his veterinary school sweetheart, Susan Searcy, and they opened Claiborne Hill Veterinary Hospital in Covington. In 1999, Commissioner Strain ran for and won election to the House of Representatives for District 74 and served a 2nd term. He was unopposed when he ran for that in 2003. He served on the Agriculture Committee and chaired the Legislative Rural Caucus while he was in the legislature. Over the years, he's earned considerable recognition for his expertise in veterinary medicine. He was one of 3 veterinarians from Louisiana chosen to train in a bioterrorism awareness program sponsored by the CDC. And in 2003, the LSU School of Veterinary Medicine presented him with its Distinguished Alumni Award. He's here today to talk to us about wildfires, drought, the state of the agriculture industry, and what his plans are for his next term. So please help me welcome Commissioner Mike Strain.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Yep, I think I need to stand on the box. All right, let me move it back a little bit. Todd, will you start the Fire NATO, please? I want you to see something that you probably have never seen, and I hope you never see again. Sabine Parish, the height of the fires. That wall of fire goes up 150, 200 feet, and it's just fire. That's one of our dozers. I guess it got too hot. Let's try it again. I didn't touch anything. And so when you look at that, we'll get it back up. But if you can appreciate that, and that's one of our dozers there. What weather conditions, wind conditions. Now, you think about fighting that fire, and you can look at the height of that. And so that was some of the conditions. Next, play the Tiger Island 113. You might lower the lights a little bit so you can really get an appreciation. So this began on August the 22nd at about 2 o'clock.
We are here on the site of the Tiger Island fire just outside of the river, Louisiana. It's burning very intensely. Those drops are really making it. Now we've got dozer crews in there. That's what I call we got to pinch off on this fire. Probably have 15 to 18 of our crews here, plus the National Guard is here. We're using air tankers as well as helicopters, and the volunteer fire departments and the regular fire departments are all fighting this fire. There's another head on this fire. We're trying to get a handle on that before it gets dark. Air tankers and the helicopters that were knocking us down. But this one we got like it's moving pretty fast, and you can feel the air picking up. That's from the heat of the fire sucking air into the fire. So they're coming. They're very close making those drops. The air tankers are making a huge difference. What they do, they work with us to allow us to get ahead of it. We have to knock that fire down out of the tops of the trees and get it down to the ground where it's only 6 to 10 feet high with flames so that we can conquer them. They run across the tops. Very difficult to contain. We've had them in a jumper road, and also what happens when it's burning.
That's on the road you were looking at a moment ago. So it's nighttime now. You don't have air support at night. So we would fight by day and hold the lines at night.
Every man and woman out here on the fire putting their life on the line, to save their community and their family and the property here. That fire. It's 109 degrees out here, and you can feel the heat and the intensity of the fire this far away. Stay here till this is means all the environmental conditions are right for a fire to become a major wildfire. Right now, we're asking everyone, please don't do any burning of any kind, including prescribed burns on agricultural property. We will not approve a prescribed burn on this.
It's about a 20-mile fire line.
It's too hot, it's too dry.
And you can see how high the flame is above those trees.
You have to pick the right conditions. The conditions aren't right for a prescribed burn. So please don't light that match. Everybody, stay safe, and we'll get through this together.
Okay, Todd, start the PowerPoint. So what brought us here? What got us to these conditions? So if you look, it's the driest that we've seen in Louisiana for generations. We had a high-pressure system that's set above the state. You know, normally in any given year, 60+% of all tropical storms and hurricanes that get in the Gulf of Mexico touch Louisiana. Until about a week ago, none of them. The driest it's ever been. And then if you took at what happened, you know, with Laura, Delta, and Ida, 1.1 million acres of timber on the ground, trees on the ground. So a lot of fuel on the ground. And then we had it to where we didn't have any rain, but we had the winds. So the drought conditions, the amount of fuel on the ground, and it was a spark ready to happen. Plus inadequate prescribed burning in a lot of the timberland. In other words, not prescribed burning as they should. That fuel's still there, and then it started. So when you look at most of the time, we get plenty of rain. We went from being one of the wettest states in the Union to one of the driest. This is today. This is the current drought monitor. Now, I can tell you, if you, like me, look at this thing every week, the drought monitor wasn't accurate. Did not properly reflect the degree of drought. There were some reasons for that. It happened in multiple states. We are correcting that, so we have proper information. So we follow the drought monitor, and you can see the majority of the state is in extreme and exceptional drought. And that's based on rainfall, it's based on ground conditions, it's based on the condition of the topsoil, many different factors how that's determined. But we also follow, it's called the KDMI index for fire. Most of the state now is at probably 600 to 700. This is at 500, goes from 0 to 800. And that's how we figured out how dry it is and the chance of fire. So if you look at the United States, I mean, here we are. Look down where we are, but look at the rest of the United States. And so that high-pressure system was running this way. And so you say, how do we get these, quote, California-type fires? All those conditions came to pass. Has that ever happened before? Yes. In 1924, 5 million acres, 17% of the landmass of Louisiana burned. In 1942, 1.2 million acres burned. Now, that was before we had organized firefighting, which began after the war. That'd be World War II. And so if you look at this, our total loss is probably going to end up this year in around 60,000 acres. So a little over like 1.2% of what it could have been, And so again, the other issue that we're facing right now is saltwater intrusion. The good news is it's backed up. Raising the sill made a difference, and then we got a pulse, just a little blast of water coming down the Mississippi River, very temporary, but a pulse, and it drove that water down. Because when we have the sill here and it drove it down, but you were already getting salt water at around here at about 300 parts per million. And we were initially worried they would get all the way past Orleans at first by October the 30th, then November the 30th, and now it looks like it won't. We're watching that very, very, very closely. We're hoping to get another pulse of water. It's a whole host of factors. Deepening the Mississippi River played a part of that. Plus, the weather conditions played a part of that. The drought in the Midwest plays a part of that. So it's really incumbent upon us to get ready for next time with that. And so that is currently what we're dealing with. Now, what does that mean? You know, you've got humans, you've got livestock, cattle. Once they get adapted to it, they can drink about 3,000 parts per million at most. It does cause problems. Makes their red blood cells very fragile. You'll see a higher incidence of disease, such as anaplasmosis. You'll see some gastrointestinal problems. But if you have the cattle that live on the coast, they live out there on the islands. Now, they are adaptive. But what also happens, if that water sits in a pool, a pond or pool, for a long period of time, Salt water drops to the bottom. There'll be a little skim of fresh water on the top. So those cattle adapt by drinking off the top of that. Now horses, they're a whole lot more sensitive. Horses very sensitive to that. But again, and you get to 1,500, 2,000 parts per million. Rice, very sensitive. So what happens with rice? That water reaches these levels, first thing you can't get is crop insurance, right? Oh yeah, salt is very important. Then again, what happens when you bring salt on cropland? 1 year, 2 year, 3 years? It builds up and becomes toxic to the plants. And then again, also with crawfish. You know, if you look at the levels they can take, but what happens is that right now with this drought, we've been pumping water on the rice fields because they were dry and cracking to save the crawfish, but now we're running out of fresh water and we're pulling in salt water. So the salt water is an issue across the state. You know, it's across, you know, through all the bayous. And the other thing we've had to do is in a lot of areas where we're normally draining outflow canals into lakes, now we're having to pump it the other way to get water for livestock. Sugarcane, you know, the good news about most sugarcane, it does not rely on irrigation, but it has a very low tolerance, about 640 parts per million. Citrus plants. Well, there's two different things you have to look at with citrus. The citrus in the ground, if you can get some fresh water, 5 to 6 inches over a few months period, it will kind of percolate on through. Or you can mix some gypsum on top to bind that. But if it's in containers, in other words, small containers, your nurseries, they're highly sensitive. So we're working, again, with the Becknells and also with the parish president, Mr. Hinckley, Mr. Keith, there in Plaquemines Parish, initially looking at trying to get some municipal water. But remember, that's a big issue because we're having to shuttle water from the northern parishes upriver down south. And if you get down to Empire, the salinity had gotten up to 1,700 parts per million. But we got readings there in Belle Chase, lower Belle Chase, and around citrus lands, about 300 parts per million. But looking at blending water, taking some Mississippi River water, blending it with municipal water, they're also putting in RO units, reverse osmosis. And you just don't shake those off a tree. Those are hard to come by. They have to, you know, we called to look, can we get one? Absolutely. Give us about 14 months. So how about 14 days? 14 months. So we have gotten some. But again, most salt either initially is very toxic or over time is very toxic. And of course, with the citrus industry, because again, most of that is, you know, in the lower parishes. And then again, if we can get some rain, we can get some water, we can flush it out of the soil. But it's very hard on those containerized plants. Companion animals, pretty much what you and I can drink. Dogs and cats, okay? And so for people, you know, the intakes, we have to keep that below 250 parts per million. But what's the other issue with salt water? If you take it into a municipal water system, what is salt? Corrosive, corrosive, corrosive. And so what it does, it leaches out heavy metals. You know, in New Orleans alone, we know there are over 50,000 lead pipes down there somewhere. Lead pipes. And a lot of the old plumbing, they put the pipes together with lead, arsenic, so they're testing for that too. And also a lot of air conditioning systems use water as part of the cooling, and the corrosiveness does what? Eats it up. So again, but this is a new thing for us. You know, we had it before a few years ago, but it only lasted 1 or 2 days. But I can tell you the governor's office and GOSEP and everyone, and Bill and you and I sat on GOSEP for a long time, really mobilized to deal with this. So this is how my August and early September was spent, fighting these fires. So a lot of brush on the ground. But again, full activation to GOSEP, which works. GOSEP works. And, you know, every state official involved in any type of emergency management there, the governor's on that end, I'm on this end. Since then, he makes me sit up by him. I guess I was talking too much and misbehaving, I don't know. But we're all in there working on whatever the problem of the day is, and then it goes into the EOC. And our functions there, I have multiple functions there. And I'm fire management, logistics, pet evacuation, and also fueling the government and emergency needs. Whatever it takes, the emergency needs and the fuel for the government, we cannot run out. So we use subcontractors, and I have tankers, and I have fueling stations. And sometimes, you know, we run hundreds of missions a day to make sure everything is fueled up. And fuel becomes a big deal when you don't have it for emergency operations. So again, in a normal year, we thought that we would have La Nina by now, right? El Nino kept sticking around. Changed our weather pattern. We're trying to figure, well, what's going on? Has the Gulf Stream shifted? Let's talk about that. Why is that high-pressure system just hanging around forever? What's going on there? You know, they said La Nina will come in February. Well, I hope she does. Because right now, you know, this is our normal fire season. It is still dry. We're not getting the rain that we need. The Midwest is not getting the rain that we need. So we really have to pay attention. And, of course, everybody can say why they think it is what it is, but that's what it is. If you look at overall crop conditions, you can see, look at the ratings, you know, of all of these crops. Hay is really bad. We got a lot of hay that they're harvesting 10% or less. Y'all saw the trucks rolling up and down? So we got a variance from DOTD based on the governor's declaration of disaster where we can move hay, because under normal circumstances, you can't move them 2 bales wide, only 1 bale. And so some people are hauling hay in from as far as 500 miles away. And so by getting it, you know, at 4 more inches on each side of that trailer, which isn't a lot, and stacking them too high, we can do that much more efficiently. Livestock, there's been a record amount of livestock going to the sale. The thing is, the prices are still holding and going up. I'm going to repeat that. Livestock are going to the sale, but the prices are going up at the sale. What does that tell you? Overall inventories looking at next year are low. In the last 3 years, we've downsized more than 10% in the United States. So livestock next year will be far more valuable than they are this year. But the bottom line is they don't have anything to feed them. The hay issue is when you walk across those pastures, right? It's like walking on Captain Crunch, right? You feel it crunching under your feet. And then everybody say, do I plant winter pasture or not? Well, if you plant it, it doesn't rain, or even worse. You plant it, you get a little bit of rain, it comes up, then it dies. Right? And so that investment is several $100s an acre. Sugar cane, the good news is we planted about 20,000 more acres than the year before. A lot of that cane, you know, we've got some good cane. It's all types. We got some that's pretty good down around the bayous, but some that is pretty rough. Some won't get harvested. But we're hoping at the end of the day that the amount of sugar remains fairly stable. We're telling USDA, don't bring in any foreign sugar. We're going to have enough. We're going to have enough sugar. Sweet potatoes, again, that's in the northern part of the state, which did a little bit better. Overall, rice, I think you're going to see short on rice. Soybeans, much worse, anywhere from 6 to a high of 50, but some it's harvested at 6 bushels an acre. Normal's 53 to 60. And if you look at corn, we got lucky. Most of the drought started as we were at corn harvest. So we were able to go through it, and they got the corn harvested real fast. So it didn't stay, you know, if you have excessive heat and the corn stays in the field with a little bit of moisture, you get aflatoxin issues, and we did not. So corn did much better. So, but it's going to be a pretty tough year. So look at the amount of excellent, right? Very little. And so if you look at the very poor, quite a high number. But that is the weather conditions. So again, Smokey Bear, and I can tell you, I want to thank you for getting the message out. Only you can prevent wildfires. And so it's a very important message, and it's really ringing true. And my statement is too, don't light that match. But again, when you start looking at, we had 10,000 homes, 10,000 structures at risk, 10,000. On August 22nd is when it really started. On the 21st, we had a small fire at Tiger Island, 8 acres, completely extinguished. The next day, it rekindled. Now, we think it had a little help getting rekindled, right? And that grew into 32,000 acres. And for 5 days and 5 nights, we had a standing order. We're not going to lose Maryville. Whatever it takes, we're not going to lose the town of Maryville. It got to within 3,250 feet of Maryville. On August the 24th, 2 days later, the Highway 113 fire was started in 4 separate spots. That ended up at 7,000 acres. So you got to pull assets away from Tiger Island to fight at 113. Then at the Elizabeth fire, the Ida fire was on the National Forest, and so there in Fort Polk, so the national people handled that. And then we started the Ragley fire, the Sabine fire, all those in an area. But the two biggest ones that took most of our assets were arson. Okay? And so what does it risk? You know, the 10,000 structures and all of the fires, we lost 10 homes. It's terrible. It's regrettable, right? But again, we stopped it. If you look at a normal year for me, I averaged 771 fires. Last year I had 1,416. You can see those dry patterns getting worse. So an average acre is about 8,500 acres per year. And you can see it crept up last year. But again, this year, so, and that's early on, we're probably now around 60,000 acres. We try to keep that burn to under 10 because of those huge fires. The average burn is about 75 acres. So as we saw this coming, you know, we're coming through May, 21 fires, June, 61, get into August, 555. And most of those started in the latter part of that month. So that we were averaging 20, 30 plus fires a day. So when you think about us fighting fires across the whole state, one Sunday, and that was at the end of August, I had 14 fires in 10 minutes, 9 of which were lightning. So we followed the lightning, 9 of which were lightning. The conditions were perfect, just perfect. But you're fighting a fire and you're hoping for a rainstorm, lightning pops. Now, on the eastern side of the state, we had 3 lightning strikes in St. Tammany on a 200-acre site. It burned so hot, so fast, that we lost wildlife. They couldn't get out of there. But then it rained. Now, in the western area, right, around Tiger Island and around 113 and Elizabeth, you had storms too. You had lightning, but no rain. Why wouldn't you get rain with the lightning and the storms on those big fires? The fires create their own environment. It's too hot. So the clouds would come in between them. And so when you start looking at the size of these things, so again, now our battle rhythm right now, we're averaging about 2 fires a day in the state, so that's very, very good. And again, if you look at these big massive fires, you know, if you get down here to Tiger Island, here, 32,000 acres. If you look at the 113 fire here, all right, 7,300 acres. They're really big when they get names. Elizabeth, 943 acres. Ida, 3,628. Lions Camp, 790. Glade. Most of these were going on in the same 2-week window. So when you talk about assets. So for 5 days and nights, we held here and here. And we started pushing these others back. And we called in the cavalry after the first day. Now it takes about 4 days to get the National Guard, get the helicopters up. They got to bring them in. It takes about 5 days to get our other teams. So we got the red team in, and they got there, and by the following Sunday they were active. At the height of the battles, the height of the fires, we went from a crew of about 150, that's us, plus other persons in the department, also pitching in and doing emergency services, transporting fuel, and that. Also all the volunteer fire departments and some of the paid, and the National Guard, to a total force of 1,200 firefighters. Now, bear in mind, we got 50 miles of fire lines. 50 miles. Think about that. That's from here to the middle of St. Tammany in fire lines. So again, you can see, you know, we're there, and of course what's burning. So there, that is one of the causes. Debris piles. I flew on Friday. I went from Monroe to here. I still saw debris piles burning everywhere, right? Debris piles. And what happens if that thing can get out of hand, you know, when that wind pushes at 10, 15 miles an hour, even the worst part, you leave it alone. Say, oh, it's all right. And that gust of wind blows in. But what happened to those huge fires, the wind would blow up, but in the center you get a downdraft. You hear about downdraft? And it would blow the embers out. And then some of those big fires, you get so hot that literally, you know, 5, 8, 10 miles away, it was very common to get more fire, small fires we would put out, but we found some embers 20 miles away still burning. So now there you go. That will cause a fire, right? And normally when that hits, it's been raining, it hits the tree or whatever and goes into the ground. Here, again, it just skips across the ground, starting those fires. And so again, that's unpredictable, and you have to get on it right away, because we have to get on these right away, because again, you don't want a 1 acre or 10 acre fire becoming a 30,000 acre fire. Now here, that's another cause, our friendly arsonist. We've made 6 arrests, and we have more pending for arson. And it's an amazing. We'd be fighting fires, and there'd be lighting fires behind us. That's another cause, right? Cigarette butts. And what happens, that gets stumped out the window, and when the conditions are right, they'll start a fire. Wildlife. What happens, squirrels and birds. That bird will hit that, will burst into a ball of flame, fall straight down, and start a fire, if the conditions are right. Then again, it's not the gentleman, he's on our team for these chains. Very common. So if they're dragging, they go down a rural road 20, 30 miles, and you start a fire every 2 miles, right? Now you think about it, you got 10 more lights, 10 more individual lights. So we were chasing those two. We had some caused from that. Y'all know what that is? There's a pink one and a blue one. I'll give you a clue. That's right. Yeah, I asked the group, and you got to be into a rural area. And so they put those, and they put those out in the field, and they shoot them with a rifle, right? But in this particular case, they were filled with accelerant, right? Oh, yes, and that starts one heck of a fire. Yep. So other things, in arson again, that $2,000 reward was up to $15,000. And specifically, the people in the western part of the state, individuals and others, legislators, put up money into this pool, and that really loosens tongues. They come and help, right? And we've made a number of arrests, but it works. That's our average unit. I have 96 of these. These are 650 dozers, big dozer with special cabs so they can breathe, and they're somewhat fire protected on special transport units. So when I got into office, we had 50 of these functional. The rest were on order. By the time of the first fire season, we had most of them. We probably had at least 90, 95 of those in operation. I also have 6 750 dozers and units. Those are federally funded. We need more. These are wore out. So that unit there is probably an 02. And so when you start looking at them, and when you put those in the fire and those on what we had everything functional. And as we need more, we have to move one to the other. We would trade off drivers. And so the men and women in the Department of Ag and everywhere else say, look, you got to go home for 6 hours and get sleep. They show up 2 hours later and be back on a dozer. But we even got our industrial type bulldozers and put those in the fire service. That's the volunteer firemen. They do a heck of a job. They are poorly funded and undermanned. I'm going to repeat that. Poorly funded and undermanned. That system works pretty good when you have a fire. Not when you are fighting a battle. Because one, they run out of diesel, they run out of manpower. And I've discussed it with the state fire marshal. There needs to be a state strike force or some type of way to have at least 6 or 7 companies that can be dispatched to an area, because they fought fires for a month, right? And everything, and the whole thing is the way it's supposed to work. They fight structural fires. I fight timber fires. But we all work together to do whatever we can, but there's simply not enough of them, and they are poorly funded. But again, these are our foam trucks. They're mainly there to put out small fires and to put out our equipment if it catches on fire. And there's John Bell and I flying, and I tell you, he did a remarkable job, and he never backed up a question. I want you to look at the length of this. These are the fire lines, right? That's on 113. That fire line, by the time it was in full fight, 40 miles. And we had some areas that we had plowed 6 and 8 wide. It's still jumping. 300 wall foot of flame, right? The flame doesn't have to touch it. Just got to get hot enough to where it ignites. And you can see the size and the scope of this, and it goes through there. So if you look at where it's burning, and of course we're in there you got to get ahead of it. When it's in the tops of the trees, you got to get it down. but they're out there pushing and working. And so we call in, that is an air tanker that's spraying retardant ahead of the fire, laying that down, trying to keep it from getting to Maryville and other areas. We had 3 of those. Every time it drops, it's $15,000 to $18,000 for that. For the bigger ones, it's $25,000 to $30,000 per drop. But we set up a mobile base at England Air Force Base and a mobile unit to manufacture that product. You know, they are wonderful. They work very, very well. And you saw that first airplane circling. That's the ultimate air boss, coordinating all of that. Those are the scooper planes. They would land in Toledo Bend, never stop, scoop up the water and come and drop. So you have them in rotation. And then again, National Guard. You know, they even dip water out of swimming pools, whatever they could get it, because remember, water was getting to be an issue, and drop on the fire. And the way they do that, you know, wherever the fire is burning the hottest, wherever we're trying to pinch it off, they would drop that water, cool it enough where we could get those dozers in and push a line. So we would push back by day and then hold the line at night. 400 National Guardsmen, as General Waddell, Casey Tingle there, Governor John Bell, our state fire marshal as well, everyone working together. And they had 400 guardsmen and they had great big dozers, and they were there. And again, fight for the community. If you look at that, that's the dirt we're standing on. It's dust. It's powdered dust. Look at that. And that shows you how dry it is. And that's in the Kostachie Forest. So again, all working together. And you see there, we're hosing the hot spots. We use satellite and other types of technology to find the hot spots. Normally, we just plow a line around it. It burns up to the line, and you're okay. Not here. And then again, that's our crew out in the West. We work. When they need us, we go. And then when we need them, they come. Plus, they get invaluable training. When this started, somebody, do you know how to fight these fires? I says, I don't have to. They know. We've dealt with this before. And again, Smokey Bear and State Forester Wade Dubé. So again, you know, what's going on in the world? I can tell you, I was looking at the numbers today. The world continues to be a hungrier place. Some changes going on. If you look at irrigated acres in the United States, overall, about 58 million acres, and it's increasing. But the thing of it is, irrigation is decreasing in the West and increasing this way. What's happening here? There's more net need for water, less available for irrigation. So, and these aquifers are being depleted. That's the bottom line. We have to judiciously use water. So where's the future of industry and agriculture going to be? Wherever there's what? Water. Remember what Mark Twain said about water? Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, right? Water is key, and it's going to be key. Why do you think Texas wants our water? For all types of development, industrial and otherwise. So again, if you look, there's a shift of that, and we are increasing irrigation to increase production. So if you look at our farmers, and again, we all know the story here. The story is real. It's also an issue up and down the river. It's a huge issue, moving that grain. That grain comes from the heartland of America. More than 60% of the grain harvested in America that goes across the world comes right down this river system. Barge rates went from about $25, per ton to $125 a ton. And that's net reflected in our exports. So again, those ships are vital to our economy, and that is going to grow. The world needs more of what we produce, and we're going to be working hard to produce it. If you look at these facilities, if you look at some of these facilities, they are huge. Each one of those facilities may export 10 to 20% of the total U.S. production of soybeans and other products. We export a lot of soybeans. Most of our corn stays here. We feed it to what? Where do we feed all of our corn to? Chickens. We've got a huge poultry industry. Now, that may change. So we're working on crushing facilities. There's a huge projects, one at the Port of Baton Rouge and others, where we're going to be maybe crushing our beans and using that directly for chicken feed, right? And so that gives us it better because there's less cost for the farmers to move their product. End of the day, more. All right, what's that? Cajun food pyramid. Come on, yo. What's that? Cajun hot tub. So again, y'all have seen this before, but if you look at the demand on our products, it's growing and growing and growing as we're one of the great bread baskets of the world. Let's get to these numbers. Farm Bill, now right now, it's on hold, right? They've got to get a speaker. They need to vote. And what I saw today, Representative Jordan is no closer than my dear friend Steve Scalise was, right? So again, if you look at planted acres, we had more corn this year. We really thought, we'd have more soybeans, but more corn. Overall, if you look at wheat production, we're producing and planting about less than half the amount of wheat we did 20 years ago. Soybeans are king, corn and beans. Louisiana, soybeans, right, versus corn. And of course, if you look, overall timber is still our largest industry. Prices really rallied until right about here. What happened here? Well, that's when the Fed raised that interest rate again, and it caused some shock into all of the markets. That shock is temporary, and I'll show these commodity prices are going to continue to go. I think you're going to see this curve start moving back up this way on all these commodities. And so again, farm expenses, some down, some still elevated. We're watching diesel price very, very, very close. Oil is going up right now, you see, but gasoline hadn't followed. Why is that? Well, there's about $10 million excess, 10 million barrels excess inventory. That's going to change. Natural gas is far more volatile than that, but price of diesel and natural gas, those are the two biggest things that goes into farm expenses. So overall, the markets fluctuating up and down. I think you're going to see corn. This has actually regressed a little bit, but they're going to start moving back up, all of these commodities, and I'll show you why. And of course, oil, if you look at oil, I think you're going to see that $100 barrel oil, especially with the instability in the Middle East. Oil and gas is still king based on all this on world economies. Job market remains strong, but interest rates keep going up. Interest rates are hard for us to overcome. A number of farmers who are having a bad year, when they tell them go borrow money, right? That's kind of tough at that level. But again, we'll see where that's going to go. But I do think you're probably going to see a quarter-point raise in the next month, another quarter point, because inflation is still kicking about 3.6, core inflation at 4.1. And again, but if you look at these rise in this interest rate, this is what's hard to deal with from a farming and a point of view, that big increase in that. Of course, we're watching the Ukraine, less talk, but what happened about 2 weeks ago, right? They damaged that pipeline in Finland, that natural gas pipeline. It's going to have an effect on natural gas. And of course, right now everybody's watching to see what's going to go on there. Bottom line, consumers are struggling. Kroger reported that its overall sales are down, and what you have is that people are buying less groceries. They're shifting what they are buying. Cereal products are still, that's where you have the highest degree of inflation in cereal products. So, have y'all bought any cereal at the store lately? Have you bought a box of cereal lately? So, tell me about the box. What does it look like compared to 2 years ago? It's taller, it's thinner. I was shocked. I went in and I looked at this, right? Yes, it's taller and it's thinner, smaller amounts.
About a third empty, too.
And about a third empty. Yes. So if you look what's going to happen as we move forward, with growth, the United States is actually going to be behind some of the developing nations. The U.S. dollar is still very strong. That is an issue compared to other currencies. And if you look at the euro, this was about an hour ago at $1.05. We like to see that at $1.15, $1.20. What's the consequence of that? It's harder for us to export products. And if you look at the British pound, $1.22, it had gotten down to 99 cents. It's moving up. But still, that's the first casualty. Sweet potatoes. We lost our sweet potato market in Europe, right, and in the British Kingdom. Specifically that one, Lamb Smith Wesson. What happened about a week ago, they notified their farmers they're going to buy their crop. They just don't want them to deliver it. You can do whatever you want to with it, right? But we will pay you for what we contracted you with, but you're not going to deliver it because we have nowhere to go with it. So we've got to find, that's one of the things that's on the top of my plate, try to figure out how to move sweet potatoes back into Europe or to elsewhere. Cropland values continue to rise, and they're going to, supply and demand. And again, if you look across, Iowa, $10,000 an acre But again, crop values continue to rise. Foreign holding of land, that's an issue. I hope Congress will take it up. We have dealt with it in multiple states. And again, China has 20% of the population, 9% of the arable land. They're the largest net importer of everything. This is a big deal. This is called the GAP, Global Agricultural Productivity Index. So if you look at where we're supposed to be over a 20-year period, we need to grow almost 2%. First 10 years of the last 20, we grew at 2%. The last 10 years, we've been growing at 1.2%. So we are losing ground. Total outputs versus inputs, that's measured in amount of efficiency. And again, what's happening? Tight global supplies. This is as of the 12th, October the 12th. This is not an aberration. This really is not reflective of what happened in Ukraine, but it's reflective of what's happening around the world. So look at rice. We're at 518 million metric tons production. Consumption, 523. We have about 3.75 months in inventory. If you heard me talk before, that was 11, 12 months. So between last month and this month, this has went down and this has increased. Okay? If you look at wheat, again, 734 produced, 761 consumed. That's how much we have in inventory. These numbers have gotten worse. On almost every commodity, the numbers have not improved over the last several months. Now, what does that tell you what's going on? Again, how do we feed this world population? So the issue is we've got to do everything we can, everything in the wheelhouse to increase production with the same resources, actually less land and less water. One of the things we continue to do, and we'll have another one, November the 2nd, free pesticide pickup. And that's at our office, but it's November the 2nd, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. If your container's leaking, we will give you a container. So far, we have picked up 345.96 tons. We expect to pick up 35 to 40 tons. It's a good program. It's a very good program to get this stuff out of the environment. We picked up stuff, you know, many containers you can't even read. I've picked up cases of DDT and everything else and get them up. So again, we talked about the dredging and that particular project. But again, it's vital for the commerce of the world. And so at the end of the day, I've been working with LSU and I've been Southern. We're looking at innovations. The innovations are key. There's a lot of technology out there. We're going to have to embrace that. We must increase production with the same resources because it's imperative that, one, we help get these food prices down, but that we have the food we need here, but extremely important, abroad. Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of the world. It exports 10% of the grain exported to the world. The United States of America exports 20%. So our share is growing. So if you look at, that's why farmland values are growing. And if you've seen the value, the investment value of a tractor, right, or a combine, you understand but what we have to do. But again, when you look across Louisiana, we have tremendous natural resources, tremendous. We have to take full advantage of that. I look forward to the next 4 years as we are working to have greater innovation, greater opportunity. We're reaching out. We're asking everybody, if you want a local food market, right, look for that certified Louisiana logo as you continue to buy fresh, local, and certified. And we are expanding export facilities across the state. And so, again, I think it's going to be a good year. With that, I think it's time for questions.
We are just about at 1 o'clock, but I think we have time to take a couple of questions. So,
my favorite drone, I'll put that up there.
When you pick up the pesticides, what do you do with them?
They are professionally disposed of. We have a professional company. Most of the time they go back and they are broken down and the chemicals extracted. We don't bury them. And they're not burned. And so most pesticides are organic based. So it's petrochemical or organic based, so they are re-refined. And that's taken. That's a very good question. Thank you. But no, we pay a professional company. And the way that works is that there's a small fee that's attached to every product that is licensed in the state. That money is segregated into a fund at the agency, and then it's earmarked and paid for that. So the company that makes XYZ, they pay into a pool that we use to dispose of the unwanted chemicals. So there's no general tax dollars used, but it's a very, very, very good program. If not, you know what happens to those chemicals, right? They tend to stay around, they tend to leach out. You know, when I was in private practice, I had a group of cattle that died from arsenic poisoning, from monosodium arsenate. Yes, that had been sitting behind a shed for 20 years, and it leached through the plastic. So yes, firsthand, it can happen. Question?
Can you
Yes, ma'am.
explain what a prescribed burn is?
Okay, yes.
And how that's natural?
So prescribed burning is a very important tool. So we have burn school, and we have different types of prescribed burning. We have prescribed burning training for farmland, prescribed burning training for marshland, and then we have prescribed burning training for timberland. And so these prescribed burners would come in, and it's through our forestry department, through soil and water conservation at LSU, they are trained. And a prescribed burn is that it has to follow all the rules of the prescribed burn. So they fill out a burn plan, you have to meet all the environmental conditions, you have to be the proper notification. We have about 1,500 licensed, certified prescribed burner, about 300 in timber. So the goal is, if you look at, if we're going to burn the rice fields, the weather conditions have to be right. The mixing height has to be right for the smoke, right? And you can't be in excessive drought. You have to fill out everything. And if you do that and you're a licensed, certified, prescribed burner, then there is a presumption of non-negligence. That's a big deal. And then for marshland is the next level up. So there's a whole, because what's out there in the marsh? Oil wells and camps and all that. So that has to be done. And then timber is the highest trained, because they have to. But the thing of it is, you need to burn at the proper time. When you have young forest plantation, it'll ruin it. As it gets higher, if you burn that underbrush every year, you never get a raging wildfire. And for longleaf pine, it's a necessity. And so, like, one of the things, we have a signed stewardship agreement with the U.S. Forest Service on the Castacia. We work with them. The goal there is to have prescribed burn at least 10% of the land per year. And one of the things happened in the Carolinas, where those massive fires started on the federal lands, they had not done prescribed burning in many years, and there was so much fuel on the ground. So it's a proper management tool, but it has to be done at the right time of the year, under the right conditions, with the right notifications and the right precautions. And a big deal is mixing height, as we say. In other words, at what height does the smoke mix into the clouds? So a whole thing. But that is a prescribed burn. Thank you.
How's the burn ban going to affect the sugarcane?
So, right, so...
they burn the stuff that's on the ground.
Yes. So a few weeks ago, or a week or two ago, I lifted the prohibition on prescribed burn for agricultural land, with the exception of standing cane. And so once they harvest the cane, then you have the debris on the ground, and then they go back, but that's a slow burn, a prescribed burn. So they have to do that. If not, next year's crop is hampered 15 to 20%. But now also, though, we are looking at ways to use every bit of cellulose that we can. So one, they're looking at new technologies that the chaff that's blown out when it's being harvested can be literally forced back into the rows. And the other thing is, if we can find a valuable source for that to be used, in other words, to be harvested. So a lot of discussion is looking at technologies using that, turning it into chemicals or into fuel. So we're also working on those technologies as well. And so it is necessary, but we also are working towards where we can take that debris and then sell it. But there's a lot of minerals in that debris. And if you don't burn it at the appropriate time, then you lose those minerals. You lose that phosphorus, you lose that nitrogen. And so it's part of the normal agricultural process.
Was there any commercial timber involved in these many fires?
Yes. If you look at the Tiger Island, that was mostly, I think it was Riceland University. Most of that belonged to one or two owners, but most of that is commercial, those large plots. If you look at the area in and around DeRidder, Louisiana, when you look at the timberland, it's timber, solid timber as far as you can see. If you get into northeast Louisiana, you'll have a cornfield, you'll have a soybean field, and then you'll have a square of timber in the middle. But where you have continuous timber, most of that is large tracts of timber. Now, you can have large and small owners, but most of those are in sections, So a mile square, and most of that is in large timberland owners. Yes.
If you put a percentage on it, what percent would you say was arson of the timber fires?
I would say between 20 and 30%. We will know better once we have everything done. And so, but yes, and so the big ones, most of the big ones were arson. Now, a couple were from the one at Ida, that one was from a burning a debris pile that got out of hand that started that. But the 113, and we have the strongest, belief that Tiger Island was arson. Those two. So that's almost 40,000 acres right there was arson. Yes.
All right, I think we're out of time.
Thank you. Thank you. We almost got to the hard questions for Todd. Thank you. You light it.
Okay.
Other
So
is fire raising by negligence.
Okay.
So that's different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, if you were cooking a barbecue grill and